Hello. Today we're going to be talking about making charts and graphs in Microsoft Excel. I'm going to be using the online version of Excel in Office 365. So let's get started. So I've already put on my spreadsheet some data, and before we can make a chart, you need to have data to build the chart with. So let's talk a little bit about setting up that data. When you set up the data, first of all, you're going to want to have your labels and your values in different columns, but you want them to be adjacent. Keep them in the adjacent columns or in the adjacent rows so the computer knows that this data goes together. Also, keep your labels, your words, to the left or to the top of your values. Very important. If you get these backwards, it's not going to work. If you put them in the same cell, it's not going to work. If you separate them out with empty columns in between, it's not going to work. Finally, when you are ready to begin, you're going to select the data you want to use to build the chart. Make sure you do not select extra cells, as that's going to be included in your chart in a way that may create gaps or a strange result. So let's start with the second group, California's proposed budget for this year. So I'm going to select all of my labels and my data. Notice I'm not selecting any additional cells. And then when I'm ready, I go up to the ribbon and I leave the home section and I go into the insert section. In the insert section, if I know the kind of chart or graph I want, I can pick it. Or if I would rather, I can click recommended charts and I can have the computer analyze the data and suggest some charts for me here to the right. If I find what I like, I can click on it, or if I know what I want, I can go straight there. Now, in this case, these numbers represent all of the money California has proposed to spend. So because it's all part of one big whole, I think a pie graph would be good for these numbers. So you select, you have a couple choices. On the desktop version, you actually have a few more choices than this, and it generates your chart. Now, once your chart is generated, you can resize it, you can move it around, make it as big or small as you find pleasing. By the way, this chart continues to be tied to these numbers, so if you adjust these numbers, your chart will adjust in real time. But we should do a little bit of extra formatting while we're here. So I'm going to right-click. If your mouse doesn't have a right button, you can try a control click if you're on a Mac, or a two-finger click if you're on a Chromebook. We're going to pick Format. It's going to open a Format section on the side. Now, one thing to keep in mind as we start formatting the different sections of our chart, your main goal is readability of your chart. You want people to understand what it is they're seeing. So if you do something and it doesn't add to the readability of your chart, may not necessarily be a good thing. So chart title. First of all, chart title is not helpful. So let's give it a title that makes sense. This is California's proposed budget. So let's go ahead and put that as our title. Enter, and that puts it as the title of my chart. That makes this graph much more understandable. Now we do have some other choices here, only a minor ability to change the position, but you can change the font and the size if you feel that is helpful. Feel free to do that. Again, keep in mind your goal is readability. It is possible to pick a font that would end up making it less readable. So you do want to be careful with that. But do have some fun, because I think aesthetics are important. So feel free to play with that a little bit. Legend. This area down here that's showing you the different slices, the different swatches. You do have some effect of where that goes. Go ahead and again, as long as you're not interfering with readability, make it look aesthetically pleasing in a way that you think is appropriate. Series, there's not a lot of series going on here. You can change the way the computer reads your data, whether it's rows or in columns. Not all charts are good to be switched that way. So in this case, that's pretty much the best we're going to get with a pie chart. Now, you do have additional options with the desktop version of Excel. You can actually color individual slices. You can color the background. You can add textures and images as your background if you desire. Again, a lot of those things are good if they make your graph more readable. They can also interfere if they make it less readable. Let's take a look at this other graph. So let's get this one out of the way. I'm just going to click on it and hit backspace to delete it. So again, I'm going to select my text, being careful not to select too much. I'm going to return to the insert section of the ribbon. And this time, these numbers are talking about the most populated cities in the United States. Inasmuch as this does not represent the entire population, I don't think a pie graph would be appropriate. So I'm going to pick a bar or a column graph. Pick the one that you think is appropriate. Feel free to click around on these to see what's going on. Now, this has different ways you can read it. Notice that everything is part of the same series, series 1, or if we switch it to read rows versus columns, you have a very different appearance to the chart, but that also changes the way your axis labels are set up. So again, feel free to experiment with these. Pick the one you think is most appropriate. I think it's very important to see our words here rather than maybe down in a legend. Similarly, we can right-click to go to Format, or sometimes you see this button up here. These will change, by the way, depending on what you have selected. So again, let's give it a chart title that's meaningful. Feel free to change the formatting if you like. Feel free to adjust the legend, move that where you like. You will also see that there are some other choices that you will see up here when you are formatting your charts. Not all of them are really obvious, so I'll point out a couple of these. Like, for example, these here dealing with tick marks. The tick marks come on this axis right here. So if you wanted to add in tick marks on the outside, you just added these little tiny white lines right in there. Actually, I think they're gray. So some of the changes are kind of minor. Some of them are a little more significant. All right, that is making charts and graphs in Microsoft Excel.